entirely relevant, but I hope it's interesting and not too distracting from the main point. So, humanity's existential crisis and the subsequent hope is quite an exciting title. With great power comes great responsibility. We as humans have, we could accidentally self-implode. We could destroy all life as we know it by nuclear, and then that's also like nuclear power is synthetic biology, pathogens, artificial intelligence. So the point there is that there's brand new existential threats, that complacency is more dangerous than ever, yet also more alluring. In our personal lives, we've got lots of opportunities to sort of seek out comfort and complacency, yet as a species, it's more dangerous than ever that we do that, because we're, for the first time in history, able to destroy all of species rather than just sort of lose our nation. And then lopsided control of the external deludes us into a dangerous arrogance. So we have amazing control over the world around us with nuclear fission and AI and synthetic biology and machines and everything. We've got a deep understanding of the external world, but that isn't balanced out, and maybe it's not balanced, but it's certainly not to the same degree that we understand ourselves and what we want and where we're headed as a species, or even as individuals. And so that leads to us thinking that we know what we're doing, and we don't. So this guy, Daniel Schmattenberger, he works in preventing existential crisis, those sorts of things on this slide. And he thinks that the way we got here was that he traces it back to the start of currency. So, because money it's a way of evaluating things. It's something that we value. It's fungible, tradable, and quantifiable, which all the sorts of things that you would value on your deathbed are not fungible, tradable, or quantifiable. The sorts of things that we really deep down value aren't those things, and so there's an inherent incompatibility between money and value. It cannot encompass value entirely. And so the global market is a misaligned superintelligence. It's leading us to increase the sort of quantifiable, fungible, tradable values are in all sorts of areas. There's things that that makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, cool. And then, so why has that been important so far that we've needed that currency? Well, globalization has prevented warfare. So what happened after World War II, I'm no expert in history, but essentially it's the idea that we trade and we have economic competition, and we've become dependent in the supply chain on other countries, which means that we can't go to war because we're dependent on each other economically. So why aren't we steering the ship? Why is it sort of all seemingly heading towards disaster? And so going back to an individual level, what is the going back to an individual level, why are we directionless, and why would one be directionless? And more importantly, why would one continue to drive themselves in a bad direction? So you see lots of crazy things on the internet. You see people doing crazy things, and in the real world, you see people doing things that just don't make sense. And all of these sort of counterintuitive behaviours make sense if you view it through the lens of pain and suffering. If you view it as, okay, suffering is the most real thing, there is no logic that overpowers suffering, there is no reason that can defeat suffering, that is at the core of your sort of being. There's no like reality that can trump that. So if pain is the most real thing and someone is in pain, then whatever alleviates that pain is the truth. Whatever that's from a Nietzschean sense of truth serves life. Whatever alleviates their pain is truth. Addiction, the value of mistakes and the damage of repeating them. So mistakes are really important. We learn lots through mistakes. Science is essentially repeated mistakes, experimentation. But the damage of repeating them. If you do, there's a great book, Atomic Habits, that I'm sure many of you have heard of, by James Clear, and he talks about the power of sort of changing 1% every day. And if you increase 1% every day over a year, because it's exponential, you get to 37.7 times the original. And if you decrease, you're almost at zero. You decrease by 1% every day. And so, why do we find ourselves in that cycle? Well, pursuing goals numbs our pain neurochemically. When we are in pursuit of an objective, it physiologically numbs the pain. And so, that can be, that's essentially addiction, but you can apply that in a much broader sense of just habit building, where any sort of bad habit can be viewed in this sense of there's an allure, it's a cycle. So you're in pain, something alleviates that pain, maybe that's accidental, maybe that's planned, and then that reinforces the idea that reinforces neurochemically that solves the problem without actually solving the problem. So it's just sort of, backseat driving. And the same thing happens in reverse with cognitive dissonance, where the more you avoid something, the more you get scared of it. Which is how any phobia starts. So an example of this counterintuitive behaviour to try and sort of to try and span the levels of analysis from the individual to the global, because lots of the global mismanagement seems to only make sense if there are like elites doing evil things, and I think that's kind of reductionary. In all tyrannical societies, the tyranny is at every level. The individuals are oppressing each other on the same level. Every concentration camp has had I don't know about every concentration camp, but the vast majority of them, they have the prisoners working not as guards, but they don't have enough guards to run the camp. The prisoners need to oppress each other. They need to inform on each other. The idea that there's an elite few that control the majority isn't the case. I think it's more like there's, and this isn't my idea at all, this is Jordan Peterson's idea on his analysis of the Nazis, but it's more like there's, I suppose, a spirit that possesses everyone in the society, and it's done such that I suppose everyone is more at risk, even the elites, but of course they're going to be less at risk just because of their status. But the example here of how this happens on all levels is I used to work in a hospital, and my supervisor, so she's very low level, she started on the same entry level position as me and then got promoted, so she's making sort of £12-13 an hour. And so, but definitely not an elite. Yeah, she had a habit of divide and conquer, and the way this would pan out is, it was essentially just stirring shit. It was, apologies for swearing, it was, so one example I can give, and this was a repeat habit, one example I can give is, when I left, I told them, I didn't know exactly what day I would be able to leave, and so I can either give you an earlier date now, but I'd like to work longer, so I can give you sort of late notice. They said that was fine. I gave them really late notice, like 2 days before leaving. My supervisor came and told me, you're not going to get paid for the last 2 weeks because you didn't give the full notice. And so I went to my boss didn't know what was going on, and it just sort of caused a lot of, it caused a big fuss. And so, okay, maybe in that situation she was genuinely confused about, and who knows where that idea came from, but she had a habit of doing this, and I don't mean to sort of pick on her, but she's not here, it's just an example, and I think we all sort of have habits that are at the detriment to ourselves and the wider community, but she, the way that pans out, the way she builds that sort of habit is, maybe one day she accidentally says something that causes her parents to get in an argument, and then she stays there and is the calm, sensible one. And so by contrast, she looks good and feels good and is elevated socially. And so that reinforces neurochemically, maybe there's a deep pain, deep suffering in her that she feels like unvalued, and then all of a sudden she's being valued for both. Ethics is meta-life strategy. It's the study of what behaviour is optimal for the long-term well-being of life itself, life as a whole. So that then becomes a very difficult thing to incorporate in our own lives. If we're trying to optimise for the well-being of life as a whole, and you can, I suppose there's part of this maybe is personal preference, but that's wholeheartedly what I believe. For the, maybe there's something I'm missing, but that becomes very difficult to incorporate in our lives individually if we're trying to optimise for the long-term well-being of life as a whole. So, how do we incorporate that in our lives? Well, with morality. So, what is morality? Well, it's an ethical strategy that we learn momentically. We pick it up through our peers subconsciously. This is the theory anyway. So this guy, Jean Piaget, he was a developmental psychologist, and there was a study where there were kids playing a game, and he interviewed them individually and said, do you all know the rules of the game? And they all said, yeah, we all know the rules of the game. You all agree on the rules of the game. Yeah, we all agree on the rules of the game. Okay, what are the rules of the game? And they all had different accounts of what the rules were. And so I imagine morality in a similar way, where it's largely intuitive because it's at a scope much larger than we can comprehend. We learn it momentically, socially, because it has to be intuitive, because it's at such a large scale, and it's such a core part of our lives that that it has to be sort of a constant process. What that perspective puts on it is it makes it role dependent. So in some people in different situations, and to give maybe a more obvious example, a bodyguard is more, you'd be less, a bodyguard beating someone up in, to protect someone isn't the same as, or maybe an MMA fighter beating someone up in a cage fight isn't the same as someone beating up. So there's ethical strategies for it's not necessarily that an action in itself is good or bad. It's about contextualizing it. So contextualizing morality. Everything is an ethical decision if you extend out the cause-effect chain long enough. So, say last night when I went to bed, that's an ethical decision of what time do I go to bed, because the more I sleep, the better the talk is today, the better I feel, blah, 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 blah. It has a long chain of consequences. So how else can we... So that's sort of the pervasiveness of morality and ethics in our decision-making, which could be seen from a religious lens as the spiritual impulse that drives us, because lots of our decisions can't be... we can't rationalise all our decisions, but so another way of contextualising it is through direction of investment. So this is so Nietzsche's genealogy of morality. He said that in the sort of 1800s, they were, and I'll be honest, I haven't read it, but there were two types of morality. There's the priestly morality, which is what the vast majority of people believed in and followed, where you sacrifice for yourself for the greater good of the wider community, and that's considered moral. So an example of that would be, to donate to charity. And then there's the knightly morality, which is about protecting your own position in order to preserve stability, which also serves is necessary for people to be like that to preserve society. If we all sacrificed the community, we would have nothing left. Same as if we all just tried to preserve ourselves, we'd have nothing left. And so you can also look at a middle ground there of an example of that would be something like I don't know, like going to the gym or something. Like you're sort of investing in yourself in the short term. Maybe I don't know, do you need me to talk through that example? No, cool. Another level of... You can look at that in the middle as well, which say you're starting a company, you can say that that is like a middle-sized community, and you take loans from the wider community to support the company. You're investing from the wider community, and you're also investing a lot of personal time and energy into the business. And so that's like a middle ground of sort of social scale direction of investment. And then levels of thinking. This is the chart I've given out. So this is the part where the hope comes in. So what happens? This is a model based on developmental psychology, some of which was by Piaget. It was made by a bloke, Ken Wilber. But the model, I actually think the model was made by someone else, and then the handout I've given you was like a simplified version. But it starts with level 1 is the basic needs and impulse. I need the loo, I need some food, blah blah blah. Level 2 is recognizing that you can get your needs met through other people. Then the next level of thinking is contextualizing it. Is saying, how can you evaluate things if everything is subjective? Well, you contextualize it. So, okay, who's evaluating it? In what situation are they evaluating it? What's the purpose? What's the end goal? And so, we're in a time where we've just had very rapid globalization, where in each of our pockets we've got information coming from all around the world, and sort of one-to-many relationships where one person can talk to millions of people. And if we do develop our moralities mimetically, then and they are role-dependent, specialist, separately evolved for different ecological niches, then what that means is that there'll be lots of conflicting moralities mimetically absorbed, which means we will be in a state of sort of moral paralysis, which can't be overcome with the level of thinking that everything must be subjective, so the value of specialization can be seen wherever you look. So the cells in your body are specialized. This chair is made differently than other chairs for a certain reason. It's in the shape of a chair so that we can sit on it. We have different jobs, and as we progress, we specialize. And then another thing to put this in context is the decline in religion. And religion, I think, ties into all of what I've discussed, in that it's centered around morality and ethics, and I believe it teaches that religion is good at teaching strategies for being ethical, and in the rapid globalization and the dominating view of subjectivity, and the scientific process, which I believe has been worshipped religiously. I believe that there's a religious impulse, and that science is one of the things that has, in the void of secularization, that science is one of the things to fill the void of secularization. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just the fact that religion is declining, and that we've lost this impulse, isn't necessarily a bad thing in the long term, because it's just society developing and adapting. The religions we're used to may be not suited to our times, where we've got such global power and consequences, and such a scientific understanding of the material world. They might not be sufficient or adaptive, and so it's totally possible that there's a thought revolution in the near future, or that we're going through at the moment, where the general populace learns to habitually contextualize their problems in order to analyze them at different levels, which I think we need to do, because there's so much comfort available to us, where we need to say, okay, well, look, if I'm on my phone 4 hours a day, where's that going to lead? We'll contextualize that and then analyze it across a time span. Where's that going to lead in 4 years, 5 years? And so I think on a personal level, I think if we
we are running a little bit low on time. Would you mind wrapping it up?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Cool, we got the death of God, Egyptian gods, no one worships them anymore, we're fine. You know what I mean? Cool, have we got time for questions, or? Cool, questions?
We've lost them and we have the mic. Right. Again, we have a few on the Woo clap, but does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
I'm just trying to film him as well. So you said that the downfall sort of started with the invention of currency. So when would you say humanity was sort of at its peak in terms of like morality and ethics and hope and sort of like that?
I would say today. We've got the best understanding, but I'd say there's also far more demands today that we're unable to keep up with.
All right, any other questions? No, okay, on to the Woo clap. So the first question that we have is, if humans are having an existential crisis, is the meta-life strategy our hope?
Ooh. I would say that as far as I understand, an existential crisis is about our position in the wider world and our possibly our value to the wider world, or the value of the wider world to us. And so I think the idea of things, that there being a higher objective that all the little actions accumulate towards, is possibly the only way out of, that's possibly the natural course of yourself, because yourself isn't a neatly defined thing.
Okay, nice. The next question is, you presented the ethical argument that we learn morals through society. Do you think this is right, and why?
Okay, I think it is, and I would say that I'd say possibly the concept of there being a greater good might be intuitive, and there might be elements that are intuitive, such as like hurting another person for no reason. I think is intuitively unethical, but I think to be able to operate in society, we learn ideas of how our actions, the consequences of our actions in the long term, and we incorporate that into our behaviour through a moral association.
Okay, it's an interesting topic, and we'll briefly be discussing it in the panel later, which is on meta-ethics, about where morals come from. The final question that we have is, what do you mean when you refer to suffering as being the most real?
So I've been sort of experimenting with the idea that what if suffering is the core of experience, the fundamental part that the rest of experience is built upon, and I sort of feel like there's some hope investigating that idea, because the Buddhists have said thousands of years ago, life is suffering, there's a few reasons I really like that idea. So it means that you shouldn't shy away from suffering. It means that expedient pleasure isn't valued because it's contradictory to life. Because pleasure if pleasure is the antithesis of suffering, then pursuing pleasure is, if suffering equates to life, pursuing pleasure is essentially following your demise. And I think that's true in all cases, possibly. But I think a demise is inevitable, and so some pleasure along the way is valued, and using pleasure as a directional tool is valued. I think that it also gives a nice hope for the afterlife. The idea of life is suffering, because it means that it means that when you die, there's no suffering, which I think lots of people would agree with. But it also means, it implies that the experience of dying is pleasurable, and so we shouldn't fear it. And there's a huge value in being comfortable with our mortality. That's something that Robert Greene's writes a lot about. Yeah.
Okay, and we do have a final question that's come through, or another final question. You say that globalization has prevented warfare, but would you not say that it still exists? It just became a means of perpetuating a global market. For example, proxy wars in third world countries for purely economic gain.
Yes, so I'd agree that globalization is sort of perpetuates the global market, and I'd say I'd be quite specific about the definition of warfare, in that the traditional warfare between nations until quite recently has been kinetic warfare with guns and cannons and swords, now I'd say we've shifted to economic and political and cultural warfare, probably because of nuclear weapons. Although there still is warfare, and the idea that it's the global market that drives that warfare, I would say is a reasonable idea, because it's at some point that we became confused about what is valuable. It's at some point that like the people. So if you imagine a politician who benefits from a war, and presumably there are lots of wars that have been caused through self-interest. Well, what is it they're really trying to get out of that? You know, because it's sort of status and money and things, but it's all it's misaligned values. If I genuinely think that if they had I think that lots of it goes back to that idea of what would you value on your deathbed, and I think that the sort of people who profit from all the horrible things going on are going to really regret it, because I think they're just confused about what's valuable to them.
Okay, we will have a couple of minutes break again to set up the next speech, but we will begin again very quickly, so stay where you are, don't run away.